Welcome Aquarius to your in-depth monthly forecast for June 2024 for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. On the screen now I'm showing your event chart right at the start of the month. Now we always need to be mindful of your two ruling planets, your traditional ruler of Saturn, your modern ruler of Uranus, but also any planet that's in your sign. And of course that is Pluto, so let's start there. Pluto in Aquarius, it's in a retrograde now. It is going to be inverting back into Capricorn from the start of September. But for now, it continues to arouse within you the concept of evolution around your identity. Now, whether it's in a physical sense, in terms of your immediate environment, or in terms of what's going on deep within you, you may find that you are altering, and that altering is therefore changing who you're connecting with. The first house though is very, very potent. But we also just need to take a look at Saturn and Uranus. Saturn continues in your second solar house. It's asking you to also, along with Pluto's push to work on your identity, Saturn's asking you to work on your sense of self-worth and values. But Saturn is going to be going retrograde from the 29th of this month, and also is going to be highly influential in the second week of June, and I will explore that with you shortly. But also Uranus starts this month very close to Mercury, a planet that's exalted in Aquarius and of course rules the second decan of your sign. But Uranus has been in your fourth house full time since March 2019. If it's been a restless time in terms of where you live or family relationships, or at times you've needed more space personally, or at other times you've needed to be up close and personal, if there's been comings and goings around the family, or your own emotional world has seemed a little bit up and down, it wouldn't be a complete surprise. But Mercury's application to Uranus at the end of May certainly gave you a chance to see the change that's gone on within you over those years in a fresh light. And in fact, Mercury is going to say au revoir to Uranus and move into your fifth solar house, Gemini, which shares your air tropicity. And that's going to happen on the 3rd of this month. So that's really exciting for you. And the reason for that, Aquarius, is the fifth house is your sunshine part of your chart. It's where you can really glow up all that's magnificent about you, whether it's your individual talents, your creativity, your flair, your artistry, whether it's about your love of socializing, whether it's your sense of attractiveness and allure. Now, of course, Jupiter moved back into this sign last month. And for the first time in 12 years, therefore, Jupiter brings its potential for growth. Jupiter technically is debilitated in the sign of Gemini. Gemini likes quick communications. Jupiter's very much more concerned with the higher purpose, especially through its rulership of Pisces, but also about big knowledge through Sagittarius. So here, the important thing is that we don't rush our communications, but essentially Jupiter in your fifth house is really lovely, and it's going to be here for a year through to June the 9th, 2005. So it opens up a big window of opportunity. But the key is that Jupiter links back to Pluto. And this is the first time these two have connected across these two air signs in our lifetimes. It's not going to happen again in our lifetimes. The first time for 220 years. Let's think about the principles of Jupiter. Jupiter can be about optimism, can be about enthusiasm, can be about self-belief, confidence, can also be about travel, higher education, excitement, freedom, independence, a lot of lovely adjectives there. But also Gemini is about that communication. So your enthusiasm about your ideas, Gemini, are given a platform for you to be much more enriching in expressing the things that you really feel passionate about. Because in life, you know, sometimes we do have to go through quite a lot of quite everyday parts of our existences. This is a chance, a window at the start of this month to really pour radiance on what makes you special. One of the things that Aquarius people can struggle with a little bit, and of course it does depend on the roots of your life, you know, what the family structure was, how much encouragement you got. If you didn't get an enormous amount of encouragement to showcase your uniqueness, and in some ways your quirkiness, life may have at times felt a little lonely. So this is an opportunity to feel more at ease with the things that make you a little different, a little novel. If you had a lot of support with those things, then you're going to embrace this energy more easily, to be honest. But the fifth house can also be about children. If you have children close to you, their pursuits and activities are going to bring a lot of joy over the next year. If you'd like to bring a child into this world, this is a very good portent. And the reason, Aquarius, is that Venus is very close to Jupiter. Venus and Jupiter are the two planets of fortune. Having them in the fifth house, which is your the part of your chart that's to do with chance, speculation and risk, it's all very, very positive. And also, of course, Venus is very, very close to the Sun. The Sun at 11 degrees is just in the second decan of Gemini, which has a sub-rulership of Venus. Venus is an energy that's very much to do with our style. It can, in the fifth house, certainly be to do with our attractiveness, our sense of romanticism. It can be brilliant for expressing qualities around music or writing, or if you love to dance. There's going to be a lot of vibrancy at the start of this month to really enjoy. Now also, the fifth house can be about marriage. Now, marriage has different forms these days. It doesn't necessarily have to be something in that more traditional sense. It can be where people live together, have much more informal relationships, but are perhaps all in. The commitment's there, it's just a bit looser. So those can also be exciting possibilities for some water bearers over the next year. But let's just think about that angle between Jupiter and Pluto. Jupiter growth, Pluto transformation. When they're well aligned in a natal chart like this, often the individual, almost absolutely every time, is very successful and can even be successful financially. Because air signs are much more to do with sharing ideas, that's going to be your currency. But certainly where you're changing, and if you've got something important to share with people, if you've got qualities that can enrich other people's lives, or you can just be great fun to be with, then those dimensions are also going to be glowing up in such a significant way. So it's truly phenomenally exciting. I just want to share with you about Mars. Mars is in your third sign. Third house very much has a flavour of Gemini. Mars in the third house can be a bit impatient, but it's very close to Chiron. If there is something that you feel a little bit less at ease with, one of the things we can do with Mars being close to Chiron, particularly in the third house, is rush our communications. Try to relax as much as you can and know the planets are giving you such a warm platform as this month begins. And from the third, things get even better, Aquarius, because Mercury returns home to Gemini, but it also links to Jupiter. If you have a first date, whether it is with a potential lover or it is in terms of a business connection, or perhaps it's just getting together with friends, it can be a really sparkling encounter. So the third, very special day, because then Jupiter forges its exact alliance to Jupiter and also Mercury. But what we get with Mercury moving into your fifth house is you're going to feel more playful, more frivolous. Mercury in the fourth house can be a bit tricky because it's a bit more inward. The more watery fourth house energy doesn't host Mercury so well. We can be more subjective. And of course you have that electric energy of Uranus buzzing things up. So Mercury moving here can see you want to come into this circle of joy that's developing and be even more playful. How good is that? And that takes us to the new moon of the 6th. And it's a fabulous new moon. We've had a lot of new moons that have been blighted by Uranus and Saturn in recent years in not particularly helpful ways. This new moon, being so close to Venus, suggests that the joyfulness that Venus can bring, it is the planet of peace, it is the planet of romance, but it is the planet of loot. And the 5th house can be about speculation. If you're absolutely convinced that something can work for you, you may be feeling particularly lucky. It's always important when Venus and Jupiter are close together to keep a sense of being grounded, and that comes to you pretty soon after this new moon with the support of your traditional ruler Saturn. Now, some people may characterize Saturn's square across the 5th to the 12th with the Sun and Venus as being something of a killjoy. I think what Saturn's doing is coming in like a grumpy parent, but very experienced, to say, well, that's all very well, but what about? And everyone says, oh, but actually that energy has a point, because what Saturn's been teaching you over the last year is to really take resources seriously. And if things have been quite tight financially, it's given you a greater appreciation of the value of resources, but also what's essential to consume or not. You know, sometimes we can be a bit thriftier and still have a great time. You know, we don't always have to splash out and be over extravagant. And that's where Jupiter and Venus can be at their worst, really, in some ways. They can sort of tempt us to overdo it. So I feel that Saturn's going to be a moderating influence. But if there is someone that you've met up with in the early part of this month, who just seem to be so adorable and so hard to resist, Saturn comes along to ask you, what are their values? What's their approach to some of the key things that's important to you? You may fancy them a lot, but could this work at a more pragmatic level? But unfortunately, if there is a love relationship that you're in, and it's not been giving you much pleasure for some while, these early energies at the start of June can arouse within you a desire to have a different type of life. And for some ties that are very weak, that Saturn square could bring them to a close. But no one is going to leave your world who's truly right for you. Be assured of that. But then on the 9th, Mars moves out of its home sign of Aries. It's been pretty impatient, 3rd house, but also giving you a push to be more physically active. And it moves into house 4, where Uranus has been so challenging at times over those years. For those 5 months in 2018, when ironically it squared with Mars in Aquarius, and then since March 2019, Mars in the 4th house is terrific if you want to catch up on those do-it-yourself tasks that have been put off, whether it's home decoration, putting those shelves up, getting the garden set up for the summer if you're in the north, closing it down if you're in the southern hemisphere. Mars is a hustle-bustle influence in the 4th house. It doesn't suffer fools gladly, but that could prove to be a problem, because Mars immediately goes into a very attritional right angle with Pluto in your sign. The impatience of Mars, but also the prickliness of Mars in the 4th house. Mars in the 4th house is a bit like Mercury in the 4th house. It's not great. Mars in the 4th house is rather like Mars in Cancer, where it's in its full, so it's not its best location. Here Mars is good to push on with altering your home space or perhaps working from home, but around emotional issues it could make you a bit more tense and edgy, defensive. And because Pluto is being so influential on your situation at the moment, it may be that the joy that's come into your life at the start of the month, it may feel that someone is slowly but surely dissipating it by pricking your balloon with various observations or limitations, Saturn. Observations, maybe defensiveness from someone else close to you in the case of Mars. And if you were really getting into your flow at the start of this month, getting very excited about some creative developments or showcasing your talents, you may have to deal with a reality check, and it could be quite severe. But I want to reassure you that across the 14th to the 16th, Venus and Mercury come into a magical alliance in your 5th house. It's not the end of the joy that they can bring, but they then both move on the 17th into the sign of Cancer. Mercury is not at its best in Cancer, but for you, this is the 6th house. If you have been developing some ingenious ideas, Mercury here is asking you to shape them up into something that's tangible and has an outcome that is definable. So in other words, get practical about the brilliant ideas you've been generating. When it comes to work, your people skills will be critical, but the sun moves to join them through the summer solstice on the 20th, ushering in Cardinal Quadrant 2. Western tropical astrology is based on the seasons. We have 4 quarters of the year that start with each season. Cancer for you is very much about those practical strands. So for the next 13 weeks, you may find yourself working on streamlining elements of your life. But equally, some of those glorious ideas that you've been showcasing at the start of this month may just need a few tweaks and nips to make them work really well. So sometimes we do need that. We can't just have the idea alone. It needs to be framed in a way which works. And the sun moving into this area will surely help you. And you can still be very creative with Venus and Mercury in your 6th house, just in a bit more of a pointed and in a bit more of an attention to detail way. But on the 22nd, we do have the moon, the full moon in Capricorn, which for you is the 12th house. If, as you come into this last phase of the month, if your energy is feeling a little bit more depleted from earlier in the month, it's important that you don't worry too much about why that is, but at the same time it's also important to accept some of the emotional energies that could be working around you. So the moon in the 12th house is a time for us to be okay and open to embracing what we don't necessarily see. So in other words, what's not tangible. So that can be to do with fears, can be to do with understanding our dreams, can be to do with giving ourselves the time to rest, just take a breath, do some lovely gentle breathing, listening to some peaceful music, get into nature. I feel that you may need a little bit of a breather as this month comes to a close, because the start of the month is so dazzlingly brilliant. The chances are you are going to be interacting with people, you are going to be socialising, mixing and mingling. There could be a love dynamic for some water bearers, for sure. Certainly, if you're a very creative person, you can be sharing your ideas to some influential people. And so by the end of the month, you just may need a breather. You may need to prioritise on what's really important, but it's also important to understand our emotional health. And of course, Pluto, through to the 21st of January, all but 11 weeks last year, has since 2008 been emphasising Aquarians' emotional, psychological and spiritual health. And you probably have learned an enormous amount about what makes you tick, but also about what makes others tick during that period of time. Quarry down into those experiences to deal with this particular full moon. And it is true that if there is somebody at work that you find or you have to interact with in some kind of practical dimension, if there is someone you find quite awkward to deal with, you do need to keep your guard up a little bit, because this full moon T-squares with the dreamy, drifting energy of Neptune. So someone could be a bit tricky, not necessarily very honest. So particularly around your professional situation, if there are people that always seem to be extremely pleasant, but you never really feel much of a connection, they're the people to really watch out for, because they could be offsetting how they really feel about you around the back, in office politics, bit of subterfuge, bit of backbiting. Just keep that guard up a little bit. But on the 29th, Saturn goes into a retrograde. It's going to invert 7 degrees, but let's recall what happened last year. Saturn moved into the sign of Pisces on March the 7th, but it got to 7 degrees and then inverted almost all the way back to 0 degrees. So we're going to have that inversion again from 19 to 12 over the next 20 weeks by the 15th of November. But I want to assure you that Saturn's already taught you a lot of lessons during its time going through the sign of Pisces. It's going to ask you how much you learnt those lessons. So it's going to revisit this more reflective understanding of how you feel about your self-worth. Remember, karma is one of the energies that Saturn manifests. Is there karma going to come back to you in terms of earnings, or what people feel about you in terms of how they value you? Are you too hard on yourself? Are you too self-critical? Do you fail to give yourself plaudits that the things you are good at? Because actually, even if money is tight, we live in a fast changing world where, because of artificial intelligence, robotics, different political changes that have gone on in recent years, means that there's been a big shift. We've also had COVID, work from home. So how we're all connecting but also earning money has changed. And of course, there's been a big uptick in the terms of costs. So don't be too hard on yourselves if there is still more to be done. And remember that your resourcefulness in a large way does come from the energies of Saturn, which helps you to stick at things, your tenacity, especially things that are maybe a little different, because sometimes it's difficult to do things that are outside the mainstream. It's less of an issue these days, but if you go back 30, 40, 50 years ago, doing something different would really be hard going, particularly in Britain. So Aquarius people have had a lot of experience in digging in when it's not necessarily been easy. And bear that in mind as Saturn asks you to just check that you can't quarry out a few extra new approaches to improve your situation, but most of all, understand your true value yourself. So it's a relationship thing with yourself, Saturn in retrograde in the second house, but it can be in an external sense, definitely be to do with money, but also Saturn can reward. And keep going, use that tenacity, keep going on the things that you really believe in, the things that this month is arousing your passion around. It's just aligning that passion to that application and that perspiration, and your reward will come. It's been a real pleasure being with you, Aquarius. I hope you have a tremendous June. It really is quite uniquely exciting. If you've yet to sub to my channel, please help it grow and do so now. And if you would like to understand much more about astrology than this zodiac forecast, if you give me 3 pieces of your personal birth data of time, date and place of birth, or your date and place if you don't know your time, I can produce for you your life roadmap report. This will give you searing insights into what's evolved for you so far in your journey, but also a much more intimate understanding of how to work with those energies future forwards. In my special package of 30% off, you can also get your 12 months transits. That's the moving planets in the sky interacting with your unique blueprint. But if you know your tropical natal astrology well, why not check out my draconic package? Understand the power of soul karmic astrology, what this has meant as you entered this world. It's the roots of all our beings. Please see below for more, and take care and all the best for now.